Hi everyone, my name's Reuben Keehan. I'm Curator of Contemporary Asian Art here at QAGOMA. I'm delighted to be joined by three wonderful artists featured in APT 10. Adeela Suleman, who's calling in from Karachi, Chia-Wei Hsu from Taipei, and Pothupitiye, who's calling in from Colombo. Welcome everybody.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
You all have very, very individual practices, unique practices. But like a lot of the artists in the exhibition, there is a certain overlap between your works. Each of your works touches on legacies of historical violence that's associated with colonialism and other competitions for territory and resources that have almost always been to the detriment of local populations. I'd like you to talk a little bit more about the subjects that you explore. Each of you, I think, looks at things that are quite local, quite specific, but within these kind of very broad scopes. And I wonder, Adeela, if you'd like to talk about what your work is about, first of all.
So the work focuses, yes, of course, on violence because the imagery is so blatant and it's in your face, and there is no way that you can not see what it is portraying. But before I get into that, it's very you mentioned colonialism and with respect to Pakistan, it got its independence in 1947. But for us, colonialism from this part of the world, colonialism is like that. It's like Pakistanis are in a amnesia, like they have just forgotten about it and they don't want to recognize it. And what was happening that the state, in the textbooks, the narrative that they built was based on the two-nation theory. And since my childhood in our Pakistan studies book, what we learned about the partition was that the divide was between the Hindus and the Muslims. And there's no mention of the British Raj in per se. So the fight was between the Hindus and the Muslim rather than taking independence from the colonial powers. The narrative is built to the extent it links us to 712 AD when Muhammad bin Qasim came and he invaded Sindh, and that was the first time that the foundation for a Muslim nation was laid down on this part of the world. So it is so convoluted, and that's what I grew up with. And it was only at the Karachi University when I went that the world was opened up to me, and we started questioning that what's the narrative that has been built by state, where army was glorified, where wars in which probably we lost so many wars, but they were portrayed as we were the heroes and the victory was achieved. And that really made me question our past in terms of that who we really are. And I started looking into the history, the Muslim history, the history of this region, the history of the Islamic history, that how things have been narrated and documented, but then how violence also has been documented. And that came in the form of the miniature painting, the only visual documentation of that happened, which in the form of pictures. And throughout history, we have seen that students in South Africa, Britain, United States, they all demand decolonization, whereas the students in Pakistan, they continue to learn why we separated on the basis of two-nation theory, and that is a shocker for me in terms of that why there is this resistance by the state not to recognize what happened in this part of the world, and that's something that I am conscious of. That is something that I question. That is something that I try to bring the present and the past together. In terms of that, how the imageries can be, can be the same, that though they are 16th and 15th century miniature paintings, but then they are reflecting the realities of today. And that is how the image is built.
Chia-Wei, you look at certain kinds of narratives as well. In the works in APT, looking, I guess, through these figures of different animals at the competition between the Dutch and the British East India companies across a very wide geography. What are the kinds of stories that you're looking at here?
Yeah, this time I have 3 works on display for APT, and it includes samurai and deer, stone and elephant, black and white Malayan tapir. So you might notice these are 3 works related to different animals. And the topic of these 3 works are kind of interrelated. It also comes from the project that I'm currently working on with archaeologists. And I have been working on a project that cooperates with the archaeological team in the past 2 years. The archaeological site in the Hoping Island in northern Taiwan, they used to have a North Holland fort on this island, which was built in 1642. And I start from this clue to connect to the Asian Sea. For example, like in 1641, the Dutch East India Company built a government mansion in Malacca. And so you can see the red house I filmed in my work, Stone and Elephant, is in government mansion. And also in 1643, there was a Cambodian-Dutch war in Cambodia, mainly competing for deer skin market. And you can see the work, Samurai and Deer, is about this background. And then you can see that many events happen intensively in the Asian water in just few years, 400 years ago. This has also become the path of my practice in the past few years. And for example, in Samurai and Deer, the concept of this work is to use the trading system of 17th century as an entry point, and use the deer skin circulating at the daytime as a clue to develop a kind of like a hyperlink cross-culture time and space. Because in the 17th century, the European currency was not popular in Asia. So VOC proposed an exchange method in Asia, such as trading Indonesian spices for Taiwanese deer skin, and then reselling deer skin to Japan for silver, and then finally taking this silver as capital for further trade. So this work, Samurai and Deer, is related to this background because deer skin was high demand in Japan during the Edo period, because the samurai is like a high class in society, so they need a lot of deer skin to decorate their armor. And after a year of hunting, Taiwan could not keep up with the demand for deer skin in Japan. So VOC start looking for alternative source, and then finally they came to Cambodia, try to take charge of the deer skin market, and then as a result, they came into conflict with the Cambodia king. The king who launched a war in 1643 along the Mekong River to expel the VOC. Yeah, and so start from this clue, I tried to develop contemporary connection, like I filmed in Cambodia and Japan. Yeah, and the other work, Stone and Elephant, is about it's talk about the Governor William Farquhar. Then the British East India Company sent to Malacca in the early 19th century. And I found one diary that written by a man who once served as a secretary of William Farquhar. This diary was published in 1849, and I select 2 of these stories for this work. One is about the elephant, because William Farquhar loved zoology very much, and he has raised many animals in the governor mansion and sent painter to paint many nature science paintings. He once hired a Malay shaman to help him catch elephant in the forest, and the shaman helped him catch 62 elephants. but in the end, only one elephant stayed alive and returned to Governor Mansion. And the other story is about this is a big complex background because Malacca originally belonged to the VOC, but at that time, the Netherlands was busy in the Napoleonic War in Europe. So the colony of Malacca was handed over to British. And then the governor of Malacca is William Farquhar. And when he preparing to return Malacca to Netherlands, he decided to destroy the fortress because they want to leave to Netherlands with a weakly defense. And in the beginning, William Farquhar asked many workers to destroy it, but the fortress was solid. It took several months with no progress. So rumors are saying that there was a devil inside the fortress, and many workers are cursed, sick, or even died. But in the end, William Farquhar brought over the gunpowder and explored the fortress. This was the first time that locals saw gunpowder. And it was also the most direct demonstration of the power of modernity in the colony. So they are all blow up. This explosion also seemed to blow up many beliefs. Yeah, so this is the background of my work, Stone and Elephant. And the other work, Black and White Malian Tapir, is also related to William Farquhar. Because after Malacca, William Farquhar was transferred to Singapore. The background of this work is about the event related to Farquhar when he in Singapore. So maybe too much detail, but my practice in the past few years are be like this. It's also like the network that I just talk about, like often connecting one to the other and then turning into making relationship. Yeah. So this is the three work that I show this time for APT.
There's a lot of layers and connections in your work, Chia-Wei. Paula, I found some kind of similar layers and complexity in the works that you've presented, looking at very particular localities, but these kind of complex histories of the way that colonial forces have formed sort of subsequent histories.
Yeah, so the work I'm exhibiting in this, the APT 10, so I'm trying to address and questioning about the colonial power. And because you know that I'm from the traditional healing dancers family in Sri Lanka, and I have learned the local art in my tradition more than 10 years. And after sometimes, so I stopped this practice because of so this is not that recognized as a Western art. This art is recognized as a low art or craft. The people got joke out of my traditions and my caste and all that. So then I stopped this practice, and then I was doing the colonial art education continuously. And then when I come to the university and studying about this, the art history and the colonial history, then I realized this, my tradition has marginalized by the colonial idea and the colonial power. So this because of that, I got me and as well as the people who in the tradition, they got the real identity crisis, right? And then what happened? The colonial power has destroyed the whole craft traditions in South Asia. So these are the things what I'm trying to address in my work.
And so what's the specific focus of the works that are in APT, Paula?
Yeah, so that special focus is about that the Eurocentrism, and you can see this the land and heritage work, right? So this is, you can see that how this I got the European map, the printed map, and then I have learned this costume making from my father, and using that all the experience, I created this the design motif using the beads and all that.
Mm.
So then I'm putting these beads design and all that undercovering by the colonial map. The process of the work itself, I'm trying to address this, how they marginalize us. That mainly I'm talking about the what you call this, the institutionalization, and also the cultural colonization. I believe this cultural colonization is more powerful than the tangible colonization, because we've been colonized by more than 100 years, and also that we got independence over 70 years now, but still we have this colonial things here in each section, even the culture section, the politics and all that. So today what I see that the neo-colonization is happening through the trade. So, and also that, you know, that the tradition which I have learned that local art from my father and other people. So in this tradition, if you go to this tradition, there are all sort of art forms is there: architect, sculpting, drama, singing, drumming, painting, and all that. So, you know, those are the things what I have learned from the tradition. You know that when I study this in tradition, the very special thing is that they don't teach you that the nationalist idea or whatever, that the racism and all that. But when I start studying in the school, which established by the British colonizers, so there I learned to be a nationalist, racist, and also you can see that how this violence happening through colonial experience, and so those are the things I'm trying to address through my work.
Yeah, it's a very powerful
Thank you.
combination. I think one of the things that strikes me is the way that you use European maps, which are kind of like this symbolic method of controlling territory.
Yes.
That's very aesthetic, and then you overturn it through the different interventions that you make in your pictures.
As I told you before, that my main concern is about the Eurocentrism, trying to get that that the day-to-day life, the people here, then when they use the words for the generally, so that most of you can find for a day the hundred of words which that's introduced by the colonizers, right? And as example, I tell you the one example, that if you're a beautiful girl but she's a black, right? So people would say, oh, she's a beautiful girl though she's a black, right? So this kind of word you can find hundred of words from a day you listen to the people, local people. So you can see that how this we got totally colonized. And the other thing is this the European power. So they establish here through the administrative system, institutions, and the political regime and all that. So you see that these things are still very powerful in the country. If you go to study in the Asian country and come back to the Sri Lanka, people don't recognize that as like, I studying in Europe country. Though it's a very good, if you have a good education system in the South Asia, but they don't recognize that as a good thing. So they recognize as always as the good thing as a European universities. And also I'm trying to get this, the institute through institutionalization. So the institutions, they produce this, the scholars, right? And then they comes and do this thing, what do you call that, these traditions are craft, blow art, or like that, right? So this is, I feel this like a professors and all that, not all of them, most of them are like soldiers. So they have trained to do this thing. So he is there was a professor, and he wrote the book called the Sinhalese folk art, right? So most of the pictures he put into the book from my traditions. So you can see, when you see that the work, which my father's type of work, which is exhibiting in the APT 10. So these works are not folk art. It's very dedicated and the beautiful work, right? So this one, that for me is not folk art. So, but these people say this is the folk art because of they trained to say that. They forced to say that because of this what you call the Eurocentric education system. So those are the things I'm trying to address and question through my work.
Yeah, it comes across very, very strongly, Paula. Thank you.
Thank you.
Adeela, it actually brings me to your work because you do make this kind of interesting choices that I suppose relate to certain historical moments. But I guess what's most striking about your work is these very, very beautifully rendered, exquisite miniature paintings on gorgeous ceramics depicting these scenes of great violence and destruction. And I guess what's within that is not just the content of the works, but the very loaded, culturally loaded media that you're using.
I work with found imagery. I work with found craft. I work with found objects, and I also work with found stories, images, and I try to bring them into my studio to make my own imagery and layer them with my experiences. The kind of life, and you know about Karachi, that it's one of the most violent cities in the world. It's in top 10, and we as a inhabitant, like living over here, I'm a complete Karachiite. We have experienced a lot of violence in the city, and this really made me question as us as a human being, that why we are the way we are, because throughout history, the course of history, we have seen that human beings have done atrocious things to each other. So there is no nation who can claim that we are innocent, and that and to read about something and to see it on a television is one thing, but to actually go through it and experience it makes you wonder that how you can respond to it, whether there are atrocities that have happened to someone else in the city, or whether the fear or the paranoia that one lives with it. My choice of imagery for the plates, and plates are something that I've been collecting, roaming around in the city, and it is so ironic that they come from England, and and they are sold here as scrap, and they are sold here as second-hand objects, and they come in containers. And I found it really ironic, because it was like history taking a full circle in terms of, and plate is something that you satisfy your soul by eating into them. But if you paint something grotesque, or if you paint something, will you be able to eat or breathe, right? So for me as a person, I always thought that as a human being, I have experienced so much that how can I even breathe? And when you and at times I think that artists are so selfish that we look at someone else's pain and we try to think that how we can use it in our work. And for me, these stories, and how can you represent something which is not representable? How can you paint something which is not paintable? Like, how do you show that the other person what they have gone through? Well, that can only happen once you have experienced something, or the fear came near to you, even if you have not gone through it. So I think that, and roaming around in the city, looking at objects, sometimes I know that I know exactly what I want. Sometimes I look at the object and I know what I want to do with it. And when I saw these plates in the second-hand market, I thought that I want to paint an image which will make people to defy their biological need in terms of that they don't want to, but you still eat and you still breathe and you still go through these, horrific experiences, and one continue to live the life. And the images that were taken, they were not specifically from, but they, you will see in the, the between two fires, there you see, the nightmare dream of the king, the fearsome aftermath of the Battle of Pushkara. That, what the king said, and he said that he has slain boys and he wanted to repent and it's a sin. For me, these things really matter. So the story can be from anywhere, but how it relates to my experiences, to my culture, and the way it has been documented, that makes me attracted towards that image. And then of course I intervene with it, so you will not see one painting replicated. I completely change it, add different elements from different paintings, add my own narrative to it, chop off heads, you will see beheaded, human beings sitting. So a very surreal, very nice, very calming scene would be then layered with a lot of violence that comes with it. I personally feel that, as human beings, we find pleasure in violence in the same way as we find pleasure, with food or sex or sports. And that is why the intensity of violence is growing so much. And we experience things that are unimaginable for a human. So what state that is that you go that you can commit such a crime? And that's the kind of, you look at Kill Bill and you see what Emma Thurman is doing with the people and killing and chopping off head, and we all sit there and we enjoy it, but it is made so graphic that you lose track of the reality that those are human beings that are being chopped off and the blood is coming out. And I want my image to be so beautifully painted that, you are stuck by its beauty, and then later you realize. So it's a back and forth process that happens between the viewer and the work, that you are drawn towards it, and then you are pushed back with the image that you see in it.
Mm. One of the things that strikes me, Chia-Wei, about your work at an aesthetic level is this use of digital technologies, things like drone footage, live Google searches, these kind of automated programs that are animating your works. Could you talk about that in the context of the subject matter of your work? These kind of digital technologies?
To answer this question, I think I can take my work Stone and Elephant as an example. In this work, during the process of making this work, I invite a Malay shaman who came from the same village as the shaman who helped William Farquhar capture the elephant in the story. And then in this work, the shaman is reading the diary and praying for the work's filming crew. And then addition to the shaman, there are two main elements. One is the elephant and the other is drone. I film the elephant in the Elephant Conservation Center and film the drone in the old town in Malacca. And when I went to Malacca for location scouting, I found that the most noticeable building in the entire old city of Malacca is an electric tower. So I start to take the electric tower as the main shooting scene. In the work, the shaman prayed drone for smooth shooting, just like talking to the drone, and the drone also communicate to electric tower. This sounds strange, but this is not a simple but a real conversation, because the electric tower provides the network signal to the city, to the old city of Malacca. And to control the drone, it depends on the network signal provided by electric tower. So although we can see it, the electric tower and the drone actually did have a connection in between. And this concept about the network is also the core of this work. When this work on display, it must be connected to the internet. So you can see the Google search page in the background of the video. It's a real-time search, which means that it will change every day. As current event change, the engineer and I designed a program that will search in real time based on our preset keywords such as the world news with the highest daily view, or like a news related to the elephant. Then this real-time search screen is combined with video I film. And why do I want to present work in this way? One of many thoughts is that actually no one of us has really experienced the error described in film in like early 19th century. We use many contemporary technology to imagine when and where we have never experienced, like the technique of archaeology or the database presented by internet. So the form of the work can also be seen to echo the electric power and drone in the film. And so as I said, my work seems to be related to a lot of history, but when it's happened and where it's happened are actually very far away from us. For example, an event happened 400 years ago. No one has experienced it at all. All of us can only imagine. So I would like to present a process of imagination. We use a lot of digital technology such as internet to imagine these things nowadays. And this history are not, for me, it's not objectively existent. They are created by us using contemporary technology. So this kind of experience of searching and browsing became a language in my work. Yeah, this is what I saw.
Thank you. Now, I think I mentioned before that there are quite a few artists in APT who are exploring these sort of questions in their work. That's not something that we determined as curators as a theme. It's something that's really emerged from our research. It's not a new concern for artists to be exploring colonialism and the sort of histories of violence, but it's interesting to me that so many artists are exploring it at the same time. I'd love to get your perspectives on what you think makes this subject so relevant at the current moment. And I might start with Paula. From your perspective, what is it about these issues that makes it so central to your work?
Actually, the European, they asked to us to do this work.
That's interesting.
Yeah, that feeling came from my side, from my experience, own experience. You know that if you see this, the subject like archaeology, art history, anthropology, these are the fields that so they're using to marginalize our part of the world and the people activity and the whole community. So they said the tradition has the historical value only, not the current value. So that's why these subjects are important for me. So the colonial subject. So yeah. So then that what happened is the people who work in these traditions, they also got the problem with their work. They can produce work, but they can't find the market because that the technology has created this the massive things, massive craft. So then these people got really trouble with living. The school, what you call the institutions, and this is also trade is very much connected with the colonization and trade. You can't separate, so they are together. That's the so this is the good example is East Indian Company. When they do trading, so they have built the power centers all around the countries, and also they collected this all the stuff, and also they kill a lot of animals like elephants for their and other animals for their hobby and as well as for the trade, right? And also that so that's why I'm especially taking this this port and fortresses, and also that I'm justifying the historical, the images. So which has a more, which represent the colonial power. Especially that you can see some of the colonial soldiers images in my work. I have some of them are in black and white, some of them are in the colored, because that the colored thing I did because of that. I personally I can feel that the power of the soldier, because that you see this all the the policemen and the army guys are wearing the uniform which has introduced by the British. So it's a very warm country, but these soldiers and the policemen are wearing a very thick dress during the daytime, right? So you can see that still they are wearing and that one, because of that it has that colonial power. You can control the people.
Yeah, Adeela,
Yes.
your thoughts?
So I think, we have seen that pain, suffering, despair and violence have been, one of the major themes in the Western art world, and we have seen it for centuries that it is happening. I think what happened for this part of the world, and especially for Pakistan after 9/11, and that is why I think violence became a very important, theme in my work. There was a bomb blast every day, and we were bashed on the television 24/7 after 9/11, and the kind of cruelty we as a nation faced that really shook us and made us challenge our identity, and also in terms of that who we are, who we really are. And I feel that, as I said earlier, that living in a city, already there was violence that was happening because of the terrorism, but this city in itself carries so much chaos and madness, and it's such a violent city that it's inevitable not to pay attention to it or not to pay heed to it, and to just remain oblivious of the fact what is happening outside. But what happened with me was that my husband, who's a human rights lawyer, he has been doing cases which really brought the violence which was outside into our personal space. He travels in a bulletproof car, he gets death threats, and that really made made us paranoid. But then one tried to see that how one can try to live, right? And for me, art is is the only way for survival, in terms of that how that you respond to it in a way that you yourself are not violent. But how can you represent something, as I said earlier, that which is unrepresentable, without, in a way that respects the victim, yet translate their experiences to the viewer through an artwork? My entire decade has been invested, more than a decade now, has been investigating into the violence, and how the city, I started gathering number of the people dying every day through city violence, through ethnic violence, through sectarian violence. And I thought that I'm going to dedicate one dead bird to each death that we were seeing, and but it was so ironic, and it was an eye opener for me, because I thought that if 23 people have died today, I'm going to dedicate one dead bird and produce 23 birds. But the death rate was much faster than my production, and I got a shock of my life that I can't even compete them in number. But forget about that, I can do anything about it. So I started making these monumental structures, and monuments became part of my work a lot. That the work started getting bigger, and I started using steel, and it became, because it's cold, it represents death, and we were seeing a lot of steel stretchers on the television, because the dead bodies were taken in and out from the hospital and from the site. And the land where the atrocities committed started becoming very important for me, because once a crime and an atrocity that has been committed on that land, you can never, like the killing fields in Cambodia, you can never look at that land ever again. And my work that was censored at the Biennale in 2019, and the title was Killing Fields of Karachi. I was just looking at a story of a young boy who was aspiring to become a model and who came to Karachi to just open up a shop and have a livelihood, and he was brutally murdered by a policeman. I was just re-narrating the story, which was already there in the newspaper, and still that work got censored, and that made me realize that the powers has in a country like Pakistan, the power art has, to that there was something somewhere that that made someone realize that this image cannot be seen by the public. And each and every 395 pillars, 52 survived, but they were all broken with hammer. State touts came and they smashed them and they took them away. And that shows you that how imagery is important, and I think why artists are resorting towards to show the images of violence, because it's in your face. What happened in Bangladesh in 1971, I have heard stories, but very few images I have seen. I saw some images when I went to Dhaka at the Drake institute, but the stories remained with me. But now if a bomb is being dropped, you see it on your television live. What happened with Osama bin Laden, that's part of Pakistan, and that Abbottabad where he was killed and captured, that land has become a monument because people go there just to see where he was living, though his house has been razed to ground, but still people going there and taking selfies. So that really makes me question, and I'm sure all the other artists are also questioning that, because their existence is now directly affected by the violence, and if they don't respond to it, I think we will go insane. We need to find a channel in terms of how we can talk about it. What is our reaction? We are neither against nor for it. It's what we see, and we make a comment on it. You can agree with it, you can disagree with it, but it's a comment. In my work in particularly, the cleavers that I have made, I looked at, as I said, that I roam around in the city. I looked at the cleavers, and the first thing that came to my mind was a Pakistani postcards that we are selling to the public, that this is a heaven, but the heaven that has been convoluted, the heaven that has been, the land, the amount of blood that the land has, absorbed. So how can you sell that image? And that's why the landscape came, onto the cleavers, that it's a chopping device, it kills and it really chops people, the not people, sorry, a living thing. And how can it, and how can we sell the land to the other nationalities, and how can we say that this is a safe place?
I mean, it's interesting. So I think sort of framing this discussion in terms of historical violence is slightly incorrect, because what you're saying, what Paula's saying, historical violence, historical colonialism, these are also current things. It's a current violence, a current colonialism. Chia-Wei, I wondered if you had any last words.
Yeah. If you see my work in this exhibition, some of them are like about VOC. And if we're looking at what the VOC did 400 years ago, it's actually the prototype of today's globalization and financial system. So it seems that we can see the origin of certain things today from this clue in the past. And in addition, my work is not to reproduce history, but to present how people look at things and imagine things in contemporary. It's about how people face context to create new meaning rather than represent. And also I attach great importance to the action of storytelling rather than the story itself. For example, because my work is like a video, so the process of making my work is similar to film production. When we see the film, we can see the story, what the movie talk about. But for me, more important part is about the real action behind the image. Like because making film, how to make film it's a real action. It's about a group of people go to some place, work with the community. So this part for me is like more important. So you will in the world, you will see a narrator reading or the interface that talk about things like and also such as the internet and search engine. And the other point I would like to refer to is to discussion on colonial history has been like developed for a long time. But my practice is try to use some different angles or different methodology. I'm not sure it's work, but for example, animals role in here, it may breaking the original framework of talking about history. So this what I thought in my work. For me, the more important part is to work with community and then create the new event. This event is related to history or related to different time space. But for me, more important thing is about how people live and how people work together in this contemporary. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thanks everybody for sharing. I think you've been extremely generous. These are very, very rich practices. These are works that are fascinating on all levels, I think. But at the same time, very, very powerful and speaking to a real urgency of the present moment. Unpaid debts of history that have only accumulated a certain interest into the present. So thank you so much for your very passionate contributions.